Hello, my friends, and welcome to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Talk. At some point, I'm probably going to run out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Things to talk about, but until then, we're going to keep going with the semi-weekly content. And today, we're going to talk about a subtype of cards, well, mostly one of my favorite archetypes, that I recently started playing for the Ritual Festival that happened a couple of days ago. And I figured I would talk about it because I actually do enjoy it, but then this is going to devolve into me talking about this type of card as well, because I'm going to have to talk about it to explain why bad it is, but still I like it. Now, if you look up here and see the card on the screen, you realize that, hey, Tsukuyomi, that sounds familiar, and you'll be right, because that's the god of the Shinto god of the moon. A lot of anime stories and fiction these days seem to depict Tsukuyomi as a chick. Hate to say it, guys, he's a guy. Just for shits and giggles, I will explain his backstory. The only famous legend we know, well, there's two famous legends: his birth, along with his siblings Amaterasu and Sunzuno, and the one story which explains why there's a night and day cycle. So, to make a long story short, his wife, Amaterasu, who is also his triplet sibling, ordered him to go meet with the goddess of fertility. She literally turned herself into food upon greeting him and spooked him so much that he killed her. And because of that, essentially, he's been put into the eternal doghouse. And that's how we have the night moon cycle in Shinto mythology. I don't know as much of Japanese/Shinto myth as I would like to, compared to Greek or Egyptian mythology, or even Norse, but I know at least a good amount. I would say, oh, well, that makes sense, I'm a weeb, except I know me knowing about mythologies isn't because I'm a myth. So, anyway, that's basically the primer for the card we're going to talk about today, which in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is called Spirit Monsters. They're based off of Eastern Asian myths, particularly the Shinto mythology or Japanese mythology, even some Hinduism. We're not going to go over all the cards because this video will be probably even longer than the Dimension Dragon video I made a couple of weeks ago. But we can at least talk about a couple of the more popular spirit monsters to explain their mechanics before we go right into and explain their role in the anime when they first appeared, and then we can go right into the meat of the video, which we're talking about Shinobirds today. So let's get started. To give you an idea of generalization of how a spirit monster works, I decided to bring out one of the more popular ones that actually has seen play, Tsukuyomi. This being basically a Book of Moon on legs. Now, Book of Moon, if you look at it now, doesn't seem like it would see any play, but back in the day, and even up to 2012 and 2013 when I played Yu-Gi-Oh! More competitively, Book of Moon was pretty good. And even this, I think, up to that point was still, limited to one. So, a spirit monster is a type of... I don't know how to explain it because it's kind of weird. So, usually, you have Spellcaster, that's self-explanatory. Then you have Effect, Fusion, the super types, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, Pendulum, Link, those are self-explanatory. But when it comes to these minor types, usually they have their in-name text would usually explain how they run. But even on every spirit monster, they still have, those, they still type out the restrictions for it. Essentially, they're supposed to be evergreen keywords. If you're magic, they're supposed to be like that. So usually how spirit monsters work is 9 times out of 10 they cannot be special summoned unless some of them can, very specific conditions. We'll talk about 2 of them here in a minute. And if it's normal summoned or flip face up, they usually activate an effect. For example, Tsukihime can target a face-up monster on the field. This can be on any field and change it to face-down defense position. Then, during the end phase, a once per turn effect, if it was normal summoned or flip summoned, it returns back to the hand. Now, Usually, the way this is supposed to work is spirit monsters have overpowered effects, which justify them being bounced back into the hand. Regrettably, their justification does not outweigh the problem being bounced back to the hand. You leave your field wide open, and 9 times out of 10, unless you're talking about certain boss monsters, their effects don't make a good impact. Tsukuyomi was one of the few cards that actually seen competitive success, and even still sees play in GOAT format to this day. The next one we're going to talk about is probably the most broken one. Just to give the explanation of what they were trying to go for. And that is Amaterasu's familiar, Yatagarasu. This thing is so infamous in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That there is a term named after him. This card and Chaos Emperor Dragon were one of the very few cards that justified a ban list in Yu-Gi-Oh! And the term that this card infinitely brought to our existence was known as the Yata Lock. Like every other spirit, it can't be special summoned. It can only be normal summoned or flip face up, which you'll never set this because it only has 200 attack, 100 defense. But if it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, they skip their draw phase. That doesn't seem powerful today. In fact, this has been, I think, limited and even unlimited nowadays, and no one has ever made this thing work. But in combination with Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End, this made a potent lock to where your opponent could not play Yu-Gi-Oh! They would have no cards in their hand, and they would not be able to draw. I know everyone jokes and says, oh my god, this is a game state where I can't play. Or, this is just, horrible. I literally can't do anything. Well, I hate to say this, you're wrong, because there probably is something you could do if you had if you had a certain card in your hand to break it. This lock prevented you from literally doing anything. This lock was so infamous that early games that allowed you to accomplish this, the AI would automatically surrender if you would achieve this lock. Now that we kind of understand what they do, what was their mainstay in the anime? Well, in the in-between arc of Battle City, right after Battle City and War of the Gods, directly in between, before the final matches for Battle City, we had a filler arc. Now, this filler arc came in after Battle City, I believe, when it was finally dubbed. I could be wrong about that because I was alive when the anime was in syndication, but I was too young to remember. And that was essentially the backstory for Kaiba, explaining how he became the cynical businessman we know him as, and his relationship to the major secondary antagonist, Noah Kaiba. Noah Kaiba would challenge Kaiba to a duel, and then after Kaiba sort of lost, Yugi would step in, and he would change his deck up by adding the spirit cards, and explain that, oh yeah, these cards were based off of, gave them their backstory, and explained that Pegasus made them after, Shinto mythology and Hinduism and all this and that when he went over to the Eastern Asian portion of the world. Kind of similar how he made the card game based off of the Egyptian mythology when he went to Egypt, which inspired, the entirety of Duel Monsters in the show. And regrettably, Spirit Monsters really have not had a break in, ever. They did see some decent amount of play during the Xyz era when the Magatamas were created, and I don't have their picture up here because I'm not really going to talk about them that much. And they do have one more playable card that even still sees minor play to this day, which we'll talk about when we go through the cards. But that is it. Regrettably, these cards have not seen play, just for the simple fact that they bounce back to your hand. They did eventually get a theme/archetype that appeared in Raging Tempest. And I actually genuinely like this archetype. But regrettably, it came in Raging Tempest, and Raging Tempest had was the start of the 2016-2017 format where no one cared about anything except Zodiac and True Dracos. And they were a plague upon our sins for like 2 years until we went into the Link era. And that is Shinobirds. Ironically, other than Yadokarasu, these are all wind spirit monsters, and I find that hilarious because one of their better cards have a restriction for specifically spirit wind monsters, and it's so stupid that there's not another generic spirit wind monster. There is a support card that's wind, but it itself is not a spirit, and that's Izanami. No, Izanagi. Izanami's his wife. Izanagi, who is the equivalent of the creation deity in Shinto mythology for those who doesn't have a basic understanding of the Shinto religion. And just ironically, all of them just seem to be basic spirit monsters. They have no they have the same problem as Ice Barriers did, where their cards don't have any cohesion with each other for the most part, and they each have basically random effects that do not really facilitate the Shinobird playstyle, which we'll get to in a moment. Which might as well just be, you want to cheat out a certain spirit monster and not give them their demerit. This is how you do it, as long as it's level 4 or lower. So this is Shinobird Crow. It has the same Shinobird spirit effect where it cannot be special summoned. When this card battles an opponent's monster, you can discard one spirit monster until the end of the battle phase. This card gains attack and defense equal to the attack and defense of the discarded monster. There are a couple of spirit monsters with high levels of attack, but you wouldn't want to be running them because you would have to tribute them. And Shinobird and spirits really don't have that much capability of swarming. Regrettably, they can make a decent, funny rank 4 engine, but you won't be able to summon the better ones because most of the better spirit monsters are double tributes, except for one, which is the new one, which is the Lord of Swords. So using him at all is not even a good idea, even in Shinobirds. I do like the ninja motif, and this is a reference to the mythology, the certain myth that the Shinobirds are connected to, which we'll talk about when we talk about the boss monsters. Next, we have Shinobird Pigeon. Same Spirit Birds effects, except you can trigger one spirit monster on the field. Oh, great. This is like a bad quality card. Hold up here. Oh. No, I will not take this out because my editing kind of sucks. Because I can barely read the card on screen. I know y'all can barely read the card on screen. That's why I'm here. No, we're not using that one. We'll use this one. Alright. Its main effect is you can target one spirit monster on the field and return it to the hand. Why? They do that anyway. That's literally all I'm going to say about this card. Why you do that anyway. And I think I did read that right, but I was just making sure that I could read that right. I guess this means you could reset like some of your effects for some of your spirit monsters. But even then, I wouldn't think that... I don't even play this card, and I'm probably the only one that plays pure Shinobird, pure spirits. So moving on to the next card, and that is Shinobird Crane. Probably one of the useful Shinobird main deck monsters. And that's because while this monster is on the field, when this monster is on the field, you can draw a card when another spirit monster is normal or special summoned. Now the problem is it has to stay on the field and be on the field, but there's a lot of ways to facilitate that, and I may only run one, only for the fact that it's the only good wind spirit monster to facilitate a certain continuous spell card's effect. And even then, with the new support, I'm probably not even going to run it anymore. But that should tell you that out of all three main deck spirit Shinobird monsters, this one's the good one because it helps you plus. Now, moving on to the main crux of the Shinobird deck style, and that is the two ritual monsters. Ritual spirit monsters. It's amazing that they came up with those contexts. And it kind of works. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of sort of works. Luckily, because their field spell, because the ritual spell can take stuff from the graveyard and banish it to summon them. And that is Shinobaron, because they're not Shinobirds, they're Shinobaron, Peacock, and Shinobaroness Peacock. Now, both of these cards are based off the two Japanese deities known as, and I'm going to probably butcher this, Orihime, which is, Shinobaron Princess, Baroness Peacock, and this one I'm probably going to butcher this badly, and I apologize. And Hikabushi? Hikabushi. These two are deities that have a beautiful love story, which the cards do kind of go through, sorta. And their myth gets celebrated during the summer end of the month for the Tatabana Star Festival. Now, yes, I do have, just saying this right now, I do have the page open, the weekend page on this festival open. For, I don't speak Japanese. I barely can speak a word of English. So, me having the wiki open for reference for these names is a lot better. So, essentially, the legend goes as this. And this is actually a Chinese myth where it originated from, supposedly. Orihime basically used to make cloth. Well, the Milky Way. Essentially, she used to make the Milky Way. And she talked to her father, which is the head god, because she was the only one to get married. So he basically let her meet this other god, Hikabushi, who was essentially the god of crows, and I'm probably misleading that because I think this is like the only myth he really was in. And they fell in love instantly, but because of that love, because they loved each other so much, they were slacking on their their godly duties, and this kind of pissed off Orihime's father. So what he did was he forcibly separated them until Orihime, with heartbreak, begged her father for her husband to meet her husband again, and that kind of moved the sky god, or her father, so he allowed them to meet like once a year, but they were separated by this river of stars, and some magpies would come over because they would feel sad about Orihime missing her husband, and they would make a bridge so that they meet each other once a year. And if it was raining, the magpies wouldn't be able to do it, and if it's raining during the Star Festival, that's called like Orihime's Tears. That is basically the gist of the myth, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. Like I said, it's one of those myths where I don't really know that well, but there's been so many retellings where I'm like, oh, okay, this sounds familiar. So, in card games, how this would work is you would use, well, for the most part, most of the time I would do is just use them because they facilitate the ritual summoning mechanic. You'd use each other to summon either one of them to the field, depending on what you need to do. Baron would bounce monsters back to the hand. If your opponent has extra monsters, that means they'll get bounced back to the extra deck. And you'll be able to special summon a spirit monster from your hand, ignoring its conditions, which also bypass their bouncing effect. Regrettably, they are level 4 or lower monsters, so you have a very limited amount of monsters you can throw out there. But that's okay, because all you need is one. And we'll get to that one here in a minute. And when it returns to the hand, when these two return to the hand, they will summon 2 tokens of Wind level 4 to the field. They're like vanilla beat stick tokens that only have 1500 attack, but you can use them to facilitate link summons, or even use them to facilitate some tribute summons, or what they're mainly there for is to facilitate even more ritual summons so you can bring them out. So typically what you want to do is, if you have Baron, You want to bring him out on the field and bounce your opponent's stuff out and hit them for 3k. And then at the end of the turn, he'll bounce back into the hand and you get 2 tokens. Unless you have Izanagi and then he doesn't bounce back to the hand, but I don't even play Izanagi even though it's a decent monster. And then you have probably the most important card in the deck. Now usually you want to go, there is a way for you to go first with this deck, but usually you want to go second. And that is Orihime herself, Shinobirds Peacock. When she's ritual summoned, you can shuffle up the 3 spells and traps your opponent's controls back into the deck. And then you can special summon a level 4 or lower spirit monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. And of course she has the same bounce effect when she returns to the hand, you summon 2 tokens. Now why is that kind of important? Well, one, it's because of this thing. Now, of course, because I'm a rambler and I like to talk about mythology, I'll explain what this is. Amado Iwado is the entrance to the underworld in Japanese mythology. It is kind of important. If you know the story of Izanami and Izanagi, or if you play Persona 4, this is essentially the rock that Izanagi throws on top of the underworld to escape his wife. So this is probably the most famous myth that come out of Japan, besides Sunzuno killing Yamato Orochi. A long time ago, the goddess Izanami gave birth to the fire deity. In the process, she died. Now, I'm not going to go through all the, kinks about this little myth, because there's more to it, where Izanami kills the sun, but that doesn't matter. Izanami, racked with grief, went to the underworld to go get his wife. And essentially, she has already eaten food from the underworld and can't leave, this and that. But the whole thing of the myth is she asked Izanagi not to look at her face because she was rotten and decayed. And he broke that promise, lighting his comb as a torch, seeing the monstrosity she had become, and basically did the one thing you never do to your girlfriend, partner, wife, whatever. Screamed at her in terror and ran the other direction. She sent demons after him and ran after him himself, only for him to put a rock at the entrance of the underworld. From the other side of the rock, she screamed that she would kill 1,500 men, she would kill 1,000 men per day. And Izanami replied, well, if you do that, I will create 1,500 men per day. And that explains, why there's so many, why humans are born, why there's the cycle of life and death. Unironically, if we go by Japan's birth rate problems, Izanagi is losing and Izanami is winning. But afterward, to get rid of the filth of the underworld, Izanagi would take a shower and wipe his face. And from him wiping his face would birth the 3 Trinity God, Sunzuno, the god of the seas, wind, and rain, Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, and Tsukuyomi, god of the moon. Now, in Yu-Gi-Oh terms, this card actually still sees play to this day. Because if it's normal summoned or is just on the field, monsters cannot activate their effects except for spirit monsters. So essentially you have a turn to set up your back row. Or you turn off your opponent's abilities that turn to prevent them from doing anything. This would literally pause your opponent really heavily. And I think back in Raging Tempest, I believe, I could be wrong, it was either Raging Tempest or at the beginning of the Link era, this saw a lot of play, so an opponent could get stop the oppressive field of your opponent, so you can at least try to do something. And everybody wanted it banned, even though it only works for one turn, and only in Shinobirds could you ever have this thing on the field. And even then, even though it has a good body for a level 4, you can simply just get rid of it with removal or run it over. And this is their ritual spell. Like I said, it's just your typical ritual spell, except you can banish spirit monsters from the graveyard to summon the Barons. Well, and the final piece of support we got for Shinobirds is Shinobird Power Spot. And this is when I said, yeah, reason why I run that one of that wind spirit monster, because whenever a spirit monster returns to the hand, if it's a wind type monster, you can search your deck for spirit or a ritual spell and add it to your hand. It's consistency, and it also gives your spirit monsters 500 check and defense. Now, for a while, that is all we had for Shinobirds, or the Shino Baron, or Shino Baroness, the Shino cards, until later. Oh yeah, and there's Shino Baron Salvation, which basically depicts them being in heartbreak that they can't see each other. This is okay. It just makes if you're wide open, you can negate the attack by banishing a spirit monster. I've barely played this. I didn't even know this card existed until recently. So, this is the card I wanted to talk about. This card came out, I believe, in... I will look this up. I believe it came out in the new Firewall set. And this also depicts their meeting, their once-a-year meeting. Ah, there we go. Okay. And... hold up. Darkwing Blast. Okay, this would be when we got the new Blackwing support. So this came out in Darkwing Blast. And this basically made it where you could floodgate your opponent on turn 1, potentially. You can activate its trap card to reveal a ritual monster in your hand and add another ritual monster, same level but different name, from your deck to your hand. So essentially, if you have one of the peacocks, you can add the other peacock to your hand, and then, not in the same turn, mind you, you could banish this card to basically activate a ritual spell from your deck, from your hand. So essentially, you could bring out Shino Baron or Shino Baroness turn 1, and if you had everything, if the stars literally aligned correctly, you could floodgate your opponent on turn 1, making them not able to do anything. And for a while, that was it until Age of Overlord, which is famous for being the most recently expensive set, where we got the shades of the peacocks, and they're actually really good. I don't want to judge on them just quite yet because I haven't played them yet, but they're basically mini versions of the Barons that have utility effects that can even be summoned from the graveyard or Banish Stone to facilitate the ritual playstyle, and even search out other stuff. Like this one can add a spell or trap from your deck to your hand that mentions a spirit monster, which could be anything, even the equipped cards that turn off their negative effects. And this one can add a spirit monster and a ritual spell from your deck to your hand to facilitate more ritual summons. And then they actually got a field spell, which helps ritual summon more of them. So you can run less of the wind ritual spell card, which I think that's what's in the fucking artwork. And you can even add set directly 1 stars align across the Milky Way from your deck, so you can run less of that card to add more utility stuff to it. Potentially, this is in a good direction. Do I still think they'll see play competitively? No, they're spirit monsters. But I really do think they'll see probably some local play. just for shits and giggles on how fun it is. Of course, people are going to be aggravated for the fact that their playstyle is to summon rock to prevent you from doing anything with your monster effects. But hey, they're also going to be summoning a ton of negates, or, making a board state where you can't do anything either. It's fair game at this point in Yu-Gi-Oh! To do something like this. But all in all, thank you for the ramblings, and I apologize for the pause through for some of these. And I hope you like me rambling on about Japanese myth and, spirit monsters as a whole. I hoped I would catch y'all again next time. I am currently playing Temtem, and I might stream that depending on how things go. It's really fun, especially since I can play with friends. And I hope to catch you next time. If you haven't already, go follow me over on Twitch. We are almost at 100 followers. I just need 5 more, and then we'll be there. And once we reach 100, I will be doing a drunk karaoke stream as per term in my contract. And I hope you subscribe here for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Talk videos, as I'm just talking about random topics. I hope to catch you guys next time. Ciao!